how do we capture user inputs in Python? Let's take a look at the input function. You may need to use this in your project, but luckily it's kind of simple. So the way this works is we took a look at some built-in functions last week, including the print function. We know the print function is one of these built-in functions. If we consult the functions that Python has available for us, previously, we've definitely been using the print function a lot. And now we're familiar with using that. Here, I'd like to draw your attention to the input function, which is another function available to us in Python. And what it helps us do is just capture user inputs and store them in a variable for later. So we could then use those user inputs and make a more interactive program. So if we want to see how to use the input function, maybe we can consult the official docs here. I guess we see this example. So let's try to implement this example in some kind of notebook, maybe even just in our custom functions exercise notebook that we were working in previously. Or maybe actually I'm going to add it to our cheat sheet. So I'm going to add this to our cheat sheet. So if we adapt this example that we find in the docs, S equals input, what are they doing here? Let's take a look. S equals input. The input function, what you should know is that it takes a single string parameter. And that string parameter is called the prompt. It's a textual message that we will specify to the user, telling them what kind of input we want. So maybe an arrow is good, but let's see, what's an example thing that a user could input? Any ideas off the top of your head? Yeah, their name, that sounds great. Like, so maybe inside the input here, we'll say, please enter your name. So you could see that this parameter, this single parameter that we specify to the input function is some textual message that will prompt the user and ask them a question. So the way that I like to do this is inside of our string, if we could use like a colon and then a space, that will end up making this look good. So basically, the way this works is that after we invoke this input function, whatever the user inputs will then be returned. And so that allows us to store that return value in a variable. Here we're calling that variable S, but you know you can call your variables whatever you want. And if it's this case, why don't we call it like user underscore name as our variable to be descriptive about the value that this variable will hold. And that's all we need to do to use the input function. Let's see this in action. Now, when we run this cell, it's actually going to stop and ask for a user input, which gives us the ability to type something in like a text box here. And so you see this cell is just waiting for us to provide that user input before it proceeds. So now as the user, we'll just type in here. And maybe we'll say like, I don't know, name like John Carroll or something. I don't know how to spell it. And now because we chose to print the value, we see it below here as well. And so that's all for user inputs. Yeah, what you're noticing, and it was like a point that I was about to make, is the fact that like if we say X equals input, please input a number, even if the user types a number, let's ask, well, what data type is this resulting value? And also print its resulting value. So the thing that you should know about the input function is that it will return a string by default, even if the user presses literally like the number 9 and then enter. Let's see, I'm just going to press the number 9 and then enter. Let's see what happens here. All right, so whoa, weird. We type the number 9 but it's a string version of number 9. So how can we get around this is your question. And so we can consult those docs. Otherwise, what we can do is override this value. X equals converting this to an integer and then printing the new version of X and its new data type. So here for the first time, we're starting to use these data type conversion functions, str, int. What we're doing here is we're going to pass some value in, and we want to convert it to an integer in this case. And you'll see examples of this in the basic data types notebook, and you'll see these data type conversion functions as well in our list of built-in functions like int. Oops, sorry for the scrolling. Let's see. Like here, let's convert something to an integer. Convert something like maybe a number to a string or to a Boolean. And later we'll work with like lists. So convert something to a list or convert something to a dictionary. We'll work with lists and dictionaries next week. But anyway, so that's one way. We'll just convert it afterwards. Oh, it's a string, we'll convert it. When we run this again, after we convert it to an integer, even if I now press the number 9, the first time we see it's a string, oops, type of X, my bad. Number 9, all right, great. It started off as a string, but we were able to convert it to an integer, at which point we can now do math with it. Yeah.
If you put in like 9.8, would it not work?
Let's see. If our intention was to ask for a decimal value here, let's see. When we convert something to an integer, it might ceiling or floor it, like round up or down. Let's see. We can always change this to float if we want, but let's see. If we say 9.8, we might get 10 or actually it's like, hey, we can't convert that to an integer because it has a decimal component. So instead, what we might do then is like convert it to a float. And that will allow us to 9.8. Now it can handle that. Now we have a float. Cool. I love that question. Yeah, go for it.
So why would you always see what, like, is there an advantage to getting a float? It's just in case someone puts it in.
Yeah, you're thinking now about how the user might input something. If we want them to do a float or an integer, like maybe using a float conversion will be more safe without converting the number that they give us. So I like the way you're thinking. That fits really well into our discussion about considering the user's experience and try to like make sure they can't mess anything up. And so, yeah, it depends on what we would want to do with this number, if we would convert it to something else. Also, the other thing I wanted to say about user experience is that it's possible for users to mess up. So even if we ask them to input a choice, they might not get it right. And so we'll have to kind of consider, well, did you do it right? Okay, but if you didn't do it right, we'll have to, if the user didn't use the software in the intended way, it's our responsibility as the developer to have the foresight to handle all possible ways that users could be dumb when they're using our software. So we'll want to do things like gracefully handle errors. If a user does something that they're not supposed to do, let's try to anticipate that and maybe give them another opportunity to get it right. So anyway, that's a little bit about detecting invalid inputs and handling errors. And so you'll see some examples here, but that's all I wanted to say about user experiences and interactions.